Well, hey, thanks for joining us on the midweek again. If this is your second week, congrats on coming back. We didn't scare you away the first time. This is just an opportunity for some of us to take some time to go over the sermon that just happened. So I'm John Bundick. I'm the Connections Pastor here at Community Church of Columbus. Over here we've got Adam Smith, the Director of Student Communities. Also, Adam, you have some big news about last night?
We had an awesome middle school hayride last night.
I was talking about the Lakers win.
That's right, the Lakers won. NBA fan, so.
And then we have the guy who actually taught on Sunday morning with us this week, gracing us with his presence.
Oh, sure.
The associate pastor, the pastor of discipleship, the one and only Luke Erb.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do here is we're just going to take some time, break down the sermon. There's a few things just as we were thinking through that we'd like to dig in deeper about and have some discussion around. And so just wanted to share that with you. Luke, it was your sermon.
Yeah, and this is going to be really interesting because you guys asked for copies of my sermon notes, and there's a beautiful mix of print and chicken scratch. And so, good luck, guys.
Chicken scratch is being really generous. I'm being honest.
I think the response after I handed it to you was like, "You preach from this?"
I don't know how you read your own handwriting.
So there you go. But yeah, no, I was yesterday was really the culmination of really kind of a year's worth of kind of going down this path and looking at discipleship, what it looks like in the local church, and kind of like what I said yesterday, just being exposed to disciple-making movements. That was just such a milestone in my own, just how I perceive like discipleship at church. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of a matter of like, okay, how can we get that here? Because, that's what we read in Scripture, and it's happening other places. Why can't it happen here?
Yeah.
So
this is all part of our Vision Mission Focus series that we started last week. Mm-hmm. And this coming week, Tim Walton's going to talk about
what is a disciple?
What is a disciple? And so we're going to try not to venture into that territory too far. But so there was some things that came out of this. On the front end, I think there was some. You had from. I don't even remember who it was from, but the data on how many churches have like a disciple-making movement is like about 5%.
Yeah. That was the National Study on Disciple Making.
Okay, so about 5% of churches have a culture of disciple-making. And so when we say that, these are churches who are actively involved in the process of training people not only to consume what they learn in studies and groups on Sunday morning in these places, but then also to go out and reproduce and make more disciples. How am I, as a person who is coming to church here, going to go out and then effectively find someone who doesn't know anything about Jesus or is brand new in the faith and then help them learn and equip them to equip others, right?
Right.
5% seems really small when we talk about the American church because there's a lot of churches, even just as we think about our county.
Right.
We have so many churches, and I probably should have Googled how many we had beforehand, but I didn't. And so, when we were talking about this earlier, Adam, you had a point about that, the 5% and like why that number is like.
How did we get to that?
Yeah. Because I think when I am listening to this and it's 5% of churches only have a disciple-making culture, mm-hmm. I think the initial shock of it is like, oh my gosh, something's wrong, like something needs fixed. But I almost think about it kind of like, have you guys ever been to the ocean, right? Yeah. Like you go out into the ocean and like you're in there for 30 minutes maybe, and like you look back to the shore and you realize you drifted so far. And so when I think about like the 5%, like that's kind of what it is, right? Like it's not like the church is scheming to like, dodge this important area. Mm-hmm. Rather, we realized over time we've drifted away from where we're supposed to be.
Right.
Now, how can we repent and turn back to where we're supposed to be?
Yeah.
So
that's exactly right.
So the thing I think about is that the church is never separate from the culture in which you find yourself, and we live in an incredibly consumeristic culture. Mm-hmm. So as you think about no one comes to we don't come to Jesus and we're instantly perfect. There's this process of sanctification where God is taking away the stuff from us that isn't who we are. And who we're not created to be, or who we're created to be. And so all of this is going away, but we bring in with us the church a very consumeristic mindset. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you some of the ways that I've heard this over 15 years of ministry. I don't get anything out of the sermon. I don't like specific aspects of either the service or how we do church. Mm-hmm. It's a very me how am I being fed? A lot of times we're like, I'm going to go to a different church because I want to be fed on Sunday morning, and it's or I don't like to do a thing, and it's not. It's when my preferences become the guiding choice in how I interact, right? And so this consumeristic mindset of like, I'm here to just take in information. I'm here to basically take in Bible trivia, right? Does good to know what Phineas' spear was made out of in like the book of Numbers.
Do you want to know? I'm just
yes, look. But if you're not using that to help people come to a knowledge of faith and to disciple them and help to grow them, right? And so to move from it's all about me and all about what I'm taking in into disciple making is a very different thing. Yeah. It's just like I'm honestly taking what I'm learning or hearing and figuring out not just what it means for me, my family, my context, but it's also for the people I'm discipling. How do I pass that information on?
Right.
And how do I take the people I'm discipling that information and push that back up and say, hey, I'm out with a bunch of people who know Jesus, and this is what I'm hearing, and we're not answering these questions. So we as a church need to figure out, this is stuff that we need to talk about.
Right. And see, that is so exciting, because that's when disciple making, when we are all involved in a disciple making culture, it begins to inform how we do church. And all of a sudden we don't have to worry about being relevant or whatever, because we already are. Because we are speaking to people, and we are interested in people coming to Christ and growing in Christ to maturity. And so we are relevant because we are addressing those things, because it is people in the world.
Yeah.
So,
and I think going off of that too, just being able to reframe it and realize that disciple making happens in the context of relationships. And for me, being in student ministry, and also with me being connected with people who aren't believers, we forget so often, if we've grown up in church or we've been a Christian long enough, what certain words mean. And so when you were able to describe what is a disciple, what's disciple making, I've heard those words plenty of times before, but to actually take a step back and to look at some of these definitions, it really helps, because it's not just about knowing it, but it's knowing how to articulate it and understand it so that you can share it with someone else.
Yeah. I was just hoping not to put everybody to sleep during that part. But, philosophy and anything else, it all goes back to definitions. Right? And because, even just saying disciple, people are going to have so many different ideas about that. And so that was one of the things that came out of the national study, was hey, we need clarity on what some of these terms mean. Yeah. And I figured, for our context here at this church, and for everybody who was listening to that yesterday, they can walk away and say, you know what, this is what CCC holds as a disciple. Yeah. This is what they hold as a disciple maker. This is how these things are defined. And you know what? I'm not quite there yet, but at least I have a trajectory point. Yeah. So.
Well, and so, and in this discussion of kind of circling back a little bit, is the relevancy piece and whatnot. I think there's relevancy can happen can mean two very different things, and if we use them interchangeably, it becomes very muddy. And it becomes this thing where it doesn't mean what we mean, and we're having different discussions and don't know it. So part of the relevancy is that is the feedback loop, right? So I was talking to my buddy Mitch Young the other day. We got coffee as a pastor up in Indianapolis, and he goes, I think about discipleship. I think about it as a cross. I'm hearing from the Spirit. I'm hearing from Jesus. So at the top of the cross. And I've got people down the foot of the cross that I'm pouring into, but the crossbar, which is I think is important here, is I have to have relationships with both people who I'm discipling who are Jesus followers and relationships there. But I also have to have relationships with people who aren't Jesus followers. Right. Because if I'm doing that, then I'm able to say, I'm not creating stereotypes. It's not an us versus them. Right. It now becomes, how do I take this Jesus message? Yeah. And because, discipleship, because the line between discipleship and evangelism, it gets real blurry at times. And so how do I take this Jesus message and not you people, but it's to my friends and my family, this is the thing that I love and I want you to know about it. Can I invite you into it? Right. And then hearing that's not even a thing I'm worried about or I'm asking about. Right. and being able to like translate that and be able to go back to the person who's discipling. You're going back to the church staff and say, hey, I'm out there doing this, I'm out sharing, and the question I'm getting is this, and I don't know how to deal with that. And if we hear that a lot, it's like, okay, so we know culturally in Columbus there's some things that we need to like deal with. I think the other part of relevance is that it's relevant to the life of the person you're discipling. I had a professor, Ted Ewing, at Taylor, so there's a Taylor mention for the cast. Last week was the mug. So, but was, he said that, discipleship is rooted in Scripture. It's relevant to the life of the person being being discipled. It's relational.
Right.
It can't be like I'm throwing it at you. It has to be I'm doing life with you.
Yeah. And I think, to that, that's why when we developed the disciple experience, there's a team of us, Stan Hill, Wendy Foster, Mike Manna, Brett Westbrook. We've met over the last 9 months to develop, the disciple experience and really have these conversations of what does discipleship look like at CCC. And that was one of the things that we wanted to make this practical. That's why we call it the disciple experience, because we wanted it to be experiential.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a matter of like, hey, I learned some things. Yeah. Next, we wanted life-changing studies that, when they do real-life discipleship, they're going to have an idea of like, hey, I'm equipped. I am confident that I can go and disciple somebody else. How to read the Bible. With Tim Mackey,
So excited. I'll be honest, like of all the stuff that we're doing, because I'm a Bible nerd, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and honestly, not to like reveal something, but that could actually be a sermon series in January and February.
Yeah.
And but as we're talking about it, how to read the Bible, I want people to go through that study and just be like, I have never thought to read the Bible in this way, right? And it all points to God and how He providentially, put this together in different time periods. He didn't want it put together yesterday.
Yeah.
So, and I want to kind of dive into something that you said yesterday, because I think it impacts the conversation that we're having right now, and I think it was such a good, one-liner, and I think you know where I'm kind of going with this. But I want you to be able to unpack it a little bit, because at least from the service I was in, I heard from the other service too, this was a good punchline. But you said, and I quote, in quotations, "We are no longer fishers of men." Again, quoting from that passage in Matthew chapter 4 when Jesus said, "Come, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." Right. You said, "We are no longer fishers of men. We have become keepers of the aquarium."
Yeah.
Would you... We could have just ended the sermon there.
Yeah.
That would have been...
Would you, kind of unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So truth be told, I was on a webinar with discipleship.org, and one of the speakers had dropped that. And I was just like, and I heard it, and I was just like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And it just stuck with me. And it was one of those that really resonated, and I was just kind of meditating on all weekend long. I think that webinar was on Thursday. So from Thursday to Sunday, I had just kind of been stewing on that. And really, I think to that point is that Jesus has called us to active ministry. Come follow me, be with me, learn from me, be my apprentice, because I'm going, you're going to stay, and you are going to carry on this work. As I have just fished you out of the water, literally for Peter and Andrew, right? And so here, you are going to continue this work. And so we've stopped that. And now, as far as keepers of the aquarium, we are surrounded by these walls. The church doesn't generally go beyond these walls. And we're more concerned of just keeping our own environment safe and sanitary and free of the world. And we have these inner struggles and everything else inside the glass, right? And so at no point is anybody going out and just saying, man, it's time to do some deep water fishing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So what would you say are some of the different characteristics between a keeper of an aquarium versus a fisher of men? You know what I mean? Because I think you talking about that really helps me understand that a little bit, because I don't regularly go to zoos and visit aquariums and so all that stuff. But when you were saying sometimes a keeper of aquarium is more focused on just what's between these four walls, instead of actually going out where the adventure and the mission is.
Yeah.
Is helpful.
You know, I think as a disciple, as disciple makers, we follow Jesus. Like, I mean, this is a life, I mean, really kind of adventure. I mean, anytime you work with people, I mean, it's always an adventure. You just don't know what you're going to get, what's going to happen, what's going on in their lives, you know, things like that. And that's fine, right? But as soon as we sign on to this and be like, hey, fishers of men, yeah, that's who I got to be. Like, you are getting involved in other people's lives. And you are sharing Christ with them, sharing the hope that we have in Christ with them. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it gets messy. Sometimes, I mean, it is definitely a growing experience, right? Whereas, you know, you stay in this safe environment, like all of a sudden, I mean, you become complacent. You become, you know, you grow weak. You grow tired. You grow, you know, there's not a lot of growth. You know, actually, it's, you know, a lot of times counterproductive. And so by going out, you grow, you become stronger, you know, you actually get to experience God as opening those doors, right? All of a sudden it clarifies what you do in the aquarium, because, you know, you come back and it's okay, but you're also bringing others back with you, and it changes the environment of it. And so I think it just keeps everything lively. I mean, it's just to feel alive. You know, and I think for many people in their faith, they, you know, feel like they've grown stagnant, or, you know, it's just kind of like, what is this about anymore? I've done all the studies, I know my Bible, blah blah blah. Like, but those aren't benchmarks for the Christian maturity.
No. Well, and so when you think about that, or when you talk about that, so there's a person here at church that comes to mind, right? So my friend Brian, I think you guys know both Brian, both know Brian, because I have words. Like, when I think about like what he's taking in here, and he serves a very specific recovery community and taking Jesus there, and the conversations I have with him are always exciting,
right? And
they're all, like, because he is pumped about people knowing Jesus. Like, recovery is his tool into helping people be discipled into Jesus. And so to hear his stories and to like talk with him about that sort of thing, and so like, and he talks about like when people come here, just like how it shifts and changes the church, and shifts and changes them. And so this idea of like, as we think about discipleship, is this thing where it's not just one way.
Right.
It's a relationship. The New Testament is an incredibly relational document. Especially in the realm of discipleship. There is a back and forth. There is, I mean, we sometimes treat the New Testament as a sterile sort of thing where like it's just this clearly laid out thing. But the New Testament it's all letters, including the Gospels. It is letters to people about like, what do you essentially need to know about Jesus in order to be a Jesus follower. When we get to the letters of Paul and the other writers, it is a lot of times there's conflict, and we need to address that. Who are you in Christ? Remember this. I love you. Stop doing that thing. Say hi to these people, right? But it's always relational, and there is a back and forth, and there is like, you can see where Paul is changed by these people because he has care and love for them.
And honestly, like I said this yesterday, this is a secret to your own personal discipleship, is making disciples of others. Like, I mean, that is where we grow. That is where we develop as Christ followers, as his disciples, is when we disciple others. And let me say one more thing about like Sunday mornings, because, you know, or the aquarium, whatever, you know, in these four walls, because when we are out and ministering and making disciples of others, and they're coming back with us, right? And you have these people that are experiencing transformation for the first time, and you inject, you know, 10 people, 20 people who are maybe attending a Sunday service for their first time, a corporate worship, right? And they're standing next to the person that is discipling them.
Or 6 feet from them.
Or 6 feet from them, right? But like, you know, what is that going to do to our Sunday morning worship experience?
No.
Oh, man. I mean, that's going to be moving. That is going to be powerful. I mean, when you see that, and then it's going to encourage everyone else who has been here for years. And all, it's just this beautiful cycle, right? This energizing cycle that we can all be a part of. And really, you know, I mean, lean into it. I mean, even for messages as we preach, we are preaching to disciple makers.
Yeah.
Not just consumers, but disciple makers who are like, you know what? I'm going to need a little bit more practicality, like a little bit more application in your sermon, because, man, I'm needing to apply this week.
Yeah.
Or I am dealing with this circumstance, and somebody else is asking me. One of the people I'm discipling, they're asking me these questions. I need to hear this.
Yeah.
And I think I know for me, and I think I've seen it in some of the rest of us as well, as we've been kind of talking about discipleship. When you started this conversation 9 months ago with this group, and you were kind of updating the teaching team and you're updating the staff and whatnot, like there was, even though it hadn't become like a thing yet, we had no plan or no like, here's the pathway, here's what it's called, or here's what we're going to do. Like these ideas of how do we shift from being consumeristic to just the questions I think we're asking as a staff in a lot of ways have shifted in the past year. And I think in part because of what you're doing, in part just because a lot of us as staff are asking those questions about how do we become a place that's not just, I come here, check in on Sunday morning, check off a box in the wow, but how are we impacting community? How are we creating space and opportunity? I think as we've started, I think one of the big things has been is we've seen baptisms on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Right? To say like, okay, so this is why we're here.
Right.
This is a huge piece of this, is that we want people to not just, we don't want to like get like notches in the belt. What we want people who go up there, they get baptized, and their life is different. Like they are experiencing the beauty and the joy of knowing Christ and living that out.
Right.
And I think as we as a staff have been kind of celebrating those as we've heard those stories, and so many stories that we've not shared, like beyond the resurrection stories and these sorts of things, like just that we are constantly hearing, like how do we have more of this, because it's exciting to like see people not only just making that first time decision, but then other people who maybe have been around for a while stepping up and saying, hey, I've got this, God's really calling me to this thing. God's really calling me to this ministry, and hearing people say like, hey, there's this new way. And sometimes it's like these bigger like organizational things, and sometimes it's like hearing people say, I'm really passionate about this thing, and seeing 2 or 3 other people join them and seeing their life changed.
Right.
And that is so exciting.
Yeah.
Whether it's this like grandiose thing, or it's like, I've got this thing that God's calling me to, and it's not big, but I think it's what he wants. Because we don't know
walking in faithfulness
in 3 generations what that does, those 2 or 3 people you're discipling or whatever. And so, that's been exciting.
Yeah, and I think in all of this, just to kind of step back a little bit and just say, CCC is absolutely primed for this.
Yeah.
I mean, we have had a discipleship culture, even though it was kind of in line with, the rest of, church culture in the United States, but it still laid a foundation for it. And then our small group ministry, right? I mean, when you have 70% of fellowship, already in relational environments, right? We are absolutely primed for this. And having been here on staff for 11 years, knowing so many people here that they love the Lord, they know about disciple making. They want to get involved. It's just this hesitancy of, well, what does that look like? Mm-hmm. And I think the more we paint that picture, the more we unpack that, the more we offer these resources to really train and equip them to do it, I think we're going to see that wildfire. I think it's just going to get set off. So,
so many doors are open right now. One of the things is CCC's been sustained by discipleship internally for a long time. Mm-hmm. We have a history of people who were raised here and came to faith here being on staff here, right?
Sure.
Just a ton of people have been really successful in the student community, the student ministry here have come from here. I went to church here. Jacob Foster, Jordan Foster, who are like helping lead our worship team. So many people who lead worship here who've left and come back, are all part. Nick Hogan, these are all people who grew up here. People who are now leading small groups. I think about these sorts of things. So discipleship again is a piece, but how do we make that just more common?
Yeah.
Right. The other thing you mentioned, and this is the thing I think might have led to some confusion on Sunday morning.
Oh, okay.
So we talked a lot about D groups, which are specific groups of you have a D group leader, 2 or 3, maybe 4 people that you're kind of specifically discipling.
Sure.
And we talked about giving them like the real life discipleship training manual, these sorts of things, starting those groups.
Mm-hmm.
I think there might be some confusion as like, so what's that mean for my small group?
Sure.
And I know that like this is probably like a much bigger question, but I think that's a thing that if I hadn't been behind the scenes for the past couple of months,
Right.
I might have some questions about. So,
Okay.
So is my small group going away? Let me ask you that. I really like my small group. Are you going to take it away from me?
No. The answer is no.
Okay, good.
So small groups has kind of had its own evolution over the last few months. We've been kind of thinking about this, and having been in small group for the last 14 years at CCC, thank you. So, one of the things that having been a small group leader for years, and everything else, we've just kind of thought about not all small groups are the same.
Yeah.
And so what we've done is in an effort to provide clarity for people interested in getting in small groups and for the leaders themselves, we've actually divided small groups up into 4 types of small groups.
Okay.
Right? So small groups is kind of that umbrella. We have 4 different types. We have support groups. This could be anything from Celebrate Recovery to like men's accountability groups, or anything really kind of focusing for that. It could be grief share.
Okay.
If they want to continue on as a group.
Or like divorce care or something like that.
Divorce care, any of those, right? So support groups, we have study groups. So classes or groups like my Sunday night seminar, even my Matthew group on Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock. Jeff Boris's men's study group on Thursday nights. Jackie Bundick's group. So your mom.
She's my mom.
And so those are study groups where people can attend and learning stuff, growing in that way, and there's not a whole lot of other expectations around that, right? We have what we used to call just small groups are now called life groups.
Okay.
And so the main focus there is actually doing life together. When everyone comes together, figure as Christians, let's be happy when Christians get together outside of Sunday morning.
I think that's
right?
kind of a good
and
thing.
so they might have a Bible study, they might have prayer, like an intense prayer time or whatever else. They could have accountability within those groups, but we're not also dictating what that life group is going to look like, because what we're happy with is that Christians are coming together and doing life together and supporting one another. Mm-hmm. That is the main focus. It's not necessarily Bible study or any of those other things. Sharing a meal, those are all extras. Mm-hmm. So if you are a life group leader and, we kind of took a break from doing a Bible study over the summer, but you're still meeting together, that's awesome. That's great. So there you go. And
so
then
the life group is like the buffet, right?
It's the buffet.
So it's like the pick and choose. They're like, here's where we're at. This is like our focus right now.
Might look like a support group for a while, but
This trip is all about the mac and cheese, like this shit. Yeah.
So finally we have the D group. And so this is a very intentional group where you have a disciple maker or a D group leader, and 1 to 5 people will agree to be in this group with them, and the D group leader will be responsible for creating that relational environment, and then also walking through the disciple experience timeline. And so going through this series, walking them through, and the whole point is to disciple them and to train and equip them to go and make disciples as well. Mm-hmm. And so what we hope to see is, as a D group starts maybe right now, within the next 3 to 6 months, maybe that D group has now added on like another whole generation, maybe 2.
Okay.
So that is the explicit purpose of that. Now, to kick this off, we are absolutely flexible because we want to encourage everyone to get into this, and the best vehicle for it are our small groups.
Okay.
So whatever small group, whether it's a support group, study group, life group, and then obviously we're starting with our D groups, but if anyone wants to jump into the real life discipleship material, we're really encouraging it.
Okay, because my group, because I'm not a small group leader, unlike everyone else at this table. But the small group I'm in, we've been talking about doing the training manual. So I just want to make sure, so it's for us too.
It's for everyone.
Okay,
that's right.
And I feel like having that classification helps, because small groups really is a large umbrella.
It is.
And so really it's not like, okay, you have to pick which one you're in. Really it's clarifying because different people have different needs. Some people need the support. Some people need the study. Some people just want to do life together.
Right.
Some people are really looking for that discipleship. So in my mind, I think this is helpful because it's just classifying and putting a name to what's already out there.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. Hey, I mean, clarifying everyone's expectations, whether it's somebody looking for a group. I mean, imagine looking for what you need is a support group, but you're joined a study group. Mm-hmm. Or even just a regular life group, and you're like, whoa, you are needing a little bit more specialization than that, like somebody really to come around you and support you in that way. So, Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem. No, that's a great question.
Just kind of thinking through this, like that's probably the thing that people watching this might have questions about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and that's one of the other, I didn't want to roll out a whole bunch of change in one morning, but hopefully here in a few weeks, we'll talk a little bit more about the relational environment, so small groups and what that looks like at CCC.
Yeah. Well, closing thoughts, because I think we're getting close to that 30-minute mark. So
Sure.
Which is, I assume that people are either like listening to this as they're doing their jogging, because at CCC we as people we love our evening runs, right? Okay.
Or walks.
Or walks.
Or bike rides.
I do enjoy a good walk.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, or your lunch break situations. So any closing thoughts? I mean, we'll only go Adam to me, and since it's your baby sermon, we'll last.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, as I think about this, I think maybe one of the initial things is like, man, I don't know anyone who doesn't know Christ, maybe, right? Or like, who am I going to actively disciple? Mm-hmm. And for me, maybe it's because I'm the student pastor, but I think a great place to start is with your family, like working through this together, because parents by and large have the most influence. In fact, last night we were at our middle school hayride, and we were having it was great. We were having deep conversations by the bonfire.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I asked was like, who is a role model in your life, or who is someone that you really look up to? And I would say 80% of the students named one of their parents.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know what I mean? And so that's awesome.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, being a disciple is intentional.
Yeah.
We can't just hope that our students are picking up our habits or our routines.
Right.
And so it's important for us as cousins, as parents, as big brothers or sisters, even younger brothers or sisters, to intentionally become a disciple-making relationship with someone in your family. So maybe a great place to start is with your family. And then the last thing I'll say is I think a lot of times we overestimate what we can do with the short term and underestimate what we can do with the long term.
Sure.
So remember that it is a marathon. It is slow oftentimes, but when those milestones hit, man, they're exciting and worth celebrating. So
Yeah, that's good.
No, I mean, I think that's huge, and I think parents forget so often that you've got 18 years, and I don't know if you've ever seen. This was the thing that just wrecked me. How many weeks do you have left until your kid's 18?
Yeah.
And it's but yeah, my parenting is intentional, and my parenting and my discipleship of my son cannot be separated. Mm-hmm. And so thinking through that, so I think that's a really great point, Adam. Mm-hmm. As a parent of a child here at CCC, thank you for reminding me of that.
And if your student is 9 years old, congratulations, your time with them is halfway over.
Oh.
Yep.
Wow.
Oh. I'm like a quarter of the way.
Yep.
I lost it. Oh, okay. So,
Man.
sorry, you're just watching an existential crisis.
Yeah, no problem.
For me, I was really encouraged by this message. I think it's going to be challenging, especially, I think this is one of those messages, and I don't want you to feel too good about yourself. But I think this is one of those messages that no matter where you're at in the journey, there was something that I think the Spirit was going to convict you with, right? Mm-hmm. It was, if it's brand new, okay, I need to be discipled, right? Or maybe if I've been, maybe I've been a Christian for 50 or 60 years. Mm-hmm. And the question of who have I actively been discipling? We both know that that's what's happening. And maybe the answer is no one.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm 36. I got some road miles on me, so I look like 46. But I'm 36. And so that question of who am I making sure that I'm taking the time to have an intentional relationship with, and started kind of listening through who are people I've been discipling or over the past year, and kind of starting to think through that. And I think to your point of maybe I don't know anyone, this is the opportunity to start praying about that.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
I think that if you ask the question like, God, who do you want me to disciple? And you ask on a regular basis for a week, he's going to give you someone. And it may not be who you think it is. And if that's who God's calling you to.
It's so exciting.
Right? It is, like, it's one of those like very terrifying, like, but exciting moments, right?
Imagine
like,
1,000 people praying that prayer.
I mean, it's amazing. Well, I mean, because I think about, like, remember, you don't get the 10 plagues, you don't get, like, the Red Sea, you don't get all of this if Moses was like, nah, that sounds hard. Like, I mean, to be fair, he did try to be like, that sounds hard. And God's like, fine. But when you do that, you do get these huge moments. And so I think praying that prayer of like, God, who's the one person or who are the 2 or 3 people you want me to disciple in my life? Who can I say like, hey, I'd really like to just meet with you on a regular basis to talk about your life and talk about Jesus. Would you be interested? And I think that, I mean, and whoever it is, do that. I think it's yeah. I mean, that would be my thing. So I think there's, like I said, I think no matter what, if you walked out and you're like, I'm fine from this message, I think you really weren't paying attention. I mean, and then it'd be about
But in all this, remembering that following Jesus, like we remember his promise that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. So this is not going to be something that is meant to like absolutely wreck you and you're just like trudging into the week, just like, oh, you know.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, it is like starting to work out. You know, if you haven't worked out for a long time, I know you were just talking about running or whatever. Man, I hate running.
Yeah.
But, you know, I know that the first week of getting out there, making myself do it, you know, and it's uncomfortable, it's not pleasant, but then you actually like, hey, I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
And hey, this running thing, like I look forward to that time because, you know, I can clear my head, you know, whatever. And it's not, I mean, this is disciple making. It's not necessarily like, it doesn't have to be unpleasant. Like this is just relationships. Relationships that you probably already have.
Yeah.
That God has already kind of put you in the middle of this spider web of relationships all around you. And it's just a matter of opening your heart, opening your eyes to really seeing God at work in other people's lives. That, you know, maybe they're going through something. Maybe they have spiritual questions. Maybe, you know, whatever it is. I mean, there's so much going on in the world. There's a lot of people asking questions. And we as Christians just need to be sensitive to that, and we need to have open hearts and be willing to have those conversations. And we've never really called it that before, but that's disciple making. Yeah. Like from those first conversations. I was just talking to somebody yesterday after service. You know, Jesus was with the disciples for 3 years before they actually knew he was the Messiah. Yeah. You know, when you think of Caesarea Philippi, hey, you know, who do the people say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And like nobody says anything. Nobody's like, hey, you're the Messiah. Except Peter, at, you know, the revelation of the Spirit, right? So he kind of cheating there. It's like, you're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God.
And then immediately.
right. And so, you know, I think when you put that together, like they walked with Jesus for 3 years and didn't, like they just weren't sure if he was the Messiah or not. So Jesus had disciples for 3 years before they came to Christ.
Because that's what it means. Christ means anointed one.
Right. Messiah, Christ, So
Christ is not Jesus' last name.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, it's a weird but important thing. Yeah.
So anyways, as we have these relationships, it's important to be patient, to have those conversations. Just continue building the relationship. And show them Christ at every opportunity. And you're growing, they're growing closer. I mean, and God is going to, he's going to reap a harvest. So.
So I'm out of tea, they're out of coffee, so that means we're done. Real quick announcement or kind of update. We just kicked off our first Simply Give campaign this year. Last Sunday. So if you've got a bonus coat lying around the house, we are collecting coats up until this Sunday. You can drop those off at Community Downtown or here at CCC. You can bring them with you at church. We're looking for coats, gloves, mittens, and hats. and those will be going to the Salvation Army. So if you have questions, you can email me at john@cccolumbus.org. One other thing is, if you're not getting Mike's weekly email, that is where Mike gives an update on just his thoughts as we're going into the week, but also that is where you get all the things that are going on in student community and discipleship, kids community and connections. What are the various ways that you can connect? So if you've not done that, you can email Melissa Teo, that's mteo@cccolumbus.org. Again, that's mteo@cccolumbus.org, and ask her to get on to Mike's weekly email list. Thanks for joining us for the midweek. We will see you Sunday morning online at 10:30 a.m.
There you go.
Or in person at 9 a.m. or 10:30. And we'll see you here online next week. Drop some comments below. Tell us what you liked. And if you've got a better title than the midweek, we are still looking. All right?
All right.
Have a great week.